Hello. In this video installment for Module 4, I'll be discussing our digital identities that have been created through technology and the impact that they're having on our lives. To begin this exploration, we must first explore our digital identity and how it may differ from our actual identity. Upon reflection for myself and for many people that I know intimately, I immediately recognize the idealistic picture that we attempt to paint with our virtual selves, that often smokescreens our real selves. I live in Hawaii, and I've found it very easy to acquire new Facebook and Instagram friends and followers since many people appreciate the stark beauty here. I have to admit that I may have even taken false pride in this, since my digital self is winning some apparent cool points. While these differences are obvious between my virtual and my real self, there are, of course, similarities. The guy who climbed, Olamana Mountain and posted that picture on Facebook is really me. The guy with the snarky comments about the experience, also me. However, my claims did not relay the grueling difficulty that this not very in-shape fella had in climbing that mountain. My virtual self rocked the mountain. My real self did not. The deeper element here is the point made by Tim Raynor in his blogs on Foucault's social work. In it, Raynor points out the performance aspect of our digital selves, and I wholeheartedly concur with this theory. Raynor goes on to describe Foucault's analogy of the panopticon prison, where all the inmates are surrounded by are in a circle in a room, and the guard shack sits in the center, so that all of the inmates at the many floors can be seen by the guard shack, but cannot see the guard, so they're constantly under watch. And Raynor states that our digital lives are analogous to this infrastructure, since we are both the guards and the prisoners in our virtual online world. We post on Facebook seeking affirmation and recognition as the prisoner's behavior changes under that constant watchful eye of the guards. We then judge others' posts and like or do not like it, similar to the guards who scrutinize the prisoners of the panopticon, which is why Raynor calls it a virtual panopticon. It is through this prism that we present our online identities, is what he purports. While we explore all the aspects of technology and social media, we begin to see that there are specific dimensions of ourselves that bleed through more overtly in our online selves. I have aspirations to someday author a novel, and I can see, looking through this prism, that I often attempt to wax witty or creative in my online comments. This is described by Raynor as a creative self-affirmation, where our talents and opinions are amplified significantly in our virtual selves. It is similar to the experience by author Peggy Orenstein, when she discovered and later became addicted to Twitter. She quickly realized that she could put a creative spin on her otherwise boring and frustrating experiences. She also noticed that the technology governed by her behavior, which she said was always on and ready to tweet about anything and everything. The effect on her personally, was similar to the panopticon, since the subjectivity of her tweets was palpable. This forced her to see poetry in everyday mundane things in a positive manner, but then forced her to relay her thoughts as a sort of performance. I've experienced examples such as this, noticing how my need to check in on Facebook when at a cool location of some sort, and how the use of technology is influencing my shaping my outlook. Both Orenstein and Turkle, in her TED speech, succinctly highlight this phenomenon by stating, "I share," or tweet, and therefore I am. TED speaker Abba Dewasar points out yet another dimension of the online self as well, time. She illustrates that while our real world exists in an arc of time, past, present, and future, we culminate these in certain moments, singular moments of our lives. Our online lives are now instantaneous and do not exist in any of the three depictions, but rather slightly ahead of the present, or what she calls the digital now. This allows us the illusion of acting in any time while pretending to act in the future. Raynor, however, continues with his line of thought, once again with a positive spin. He recognizes that our digital identity is a culmination of both our social and technological influences. He refers to Foucault's premise that the self is not given, but is made and remade. I tend to agree with the nurture dominance in the nature-nurture argument here, especially with a constantly evolving technological world. Raynor also purports that social media is now simply part of the overall art of life, which is just another tool in our constant struggle to construct ourselves, virtual and real. Plotinus said in ancient Rome, "Never stop sculpting your own statue," and that sentiment holds true today as we strive to complete our own independent statues. Of course, the dilemma that exists, as I touched on earlier, is the difference between our two selves. We feel obligated to perform when we tweet or post since we know it exists in the public domain. When we're in public, we must be cognizant of our surroundings. And while we post things in public, we are influenced by that level of exposure that our information will have. In addition, our digital self has sometimes affected our sense of self. As the psychologist Sherry Turkle highlights, we will sit in a room of people for lengths of time while we seek our phones rather than speaking to them. And we're all actually, in essence, alone together, she calls it. She goes on to point out how we now seek just the right amount of actual interaction, which she calls the Goldilocks effect. Not too little, not too much, but just the right amount, which we can control through technology. She additionally proposes that conversations are a dying art, and without conversation, the skill of self-reflection suffers. So we seek our phones even more, since Turkle points out that there are three fantasies that it provides for us. Number one, it puts our attention wherever we wish. Number two, we'll always be heard. And number three, we never have to be alone. This exploration into our digital identity comes down to a few basic elements. We see that it brings out or at least highlights some interesting aspects of ourselves. Also, as technology increases, we not only rely on it as a tool, but we're coming to rely on it to satisfy our own psychological needs. The need for acceptance, and of course the need to avoid being alone. The true irony is that we now prefer our technology to the social interactions that used to satisfy these needs. That technology, while amazing, in the end will likely come up short. And where will that leave the current and future generations who see technology as a wonder, to be adored, and they do not yet recognize the caution that they should be prepared to take as this goes forward in the future? Thank you.